The following is an Encore episode. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. In the 1930s, hundreds of mostly African American workers died digging the Hawk's Nest Tunnel. A photographer brings their stories to life.
And in those images, you can see lives lived. You can see desires and needs. For me, that is a light. This is where I find hope. They just weren't victims, but they were people with full lives.
When Jerry Machen began making art from old carpets, his wife Linda wasn't impressed.
I walk in from work and my whole kitchen floor is covered with pieces, and he's going to put a picture together. And I'm like, is it going to be done before I have to start supper?
And a new exhibit shares the cultures of Indigenous people who call Appalachia home, like a singer from the Tuscarora tribe. You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Hawk's Nest Tunnel in Fayette County, West Virginia, is the site of one of the worst industrial disasters in American history. More than 700 men died of lung disease as a result of mining the tunnel in the 1930s. Most of the workers were African American. A new photography book sets out to bring their untold stories to life. It's called Appalachian Ghost, a photographic reimagining of the Hawk's Nest Tunnel disaster by artist, educator, and journalist Raymond Thompson, Jr. He joins the show to talk about it. Raymond Thompson, Jr., thank you for coming on Inside Appalachia to speak with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
So, your book is Appalachian Ghost, a photographic reimagining of the Hawk's Nest Tunnel disaster. It was published this spring. For those unfamiliar, can you describe Hawk's Nest Tunnel and what happened there?
Yeah, so in Ansted, West Virginia in the 1930s, there was a construction project to divert the New River. And in that project, they were building a dam to divert the river. And they also were building a powerhouse roughly 3.5 miles downstream. And they also were building a tunnel to connect the dam and the powerhouse. And to do that, they needed to dig through a mountainside, essentially. And while they were digging through the mountainside, they came across a portion of silica rock. And because they were using improper drilling techniques, they were using dry drills on like rock filled with silica. It kicked up a lot of silica dust. And many of the men working in the tunnel would have contracted silicosis. And silicosis, once it gets into your lungs, pretty much just destroys your lungs and you slowly suffocate. So it's thought that roughly there were like 5,000 workers in total who worked on the project, and roughly 3,000 of those workers were actually working underground and in the tunnel. A demographer has put the number of potential workers who have died roughly around 764 people, which would make the Hawk's Nest Tunnel disaster one of the worst disasters in U.S. history.
How did you first become aware of the story of these workers who excavated Hawk's Nest Tunnel?
Well, I was working at West Virginia University for their alumni magazine, and we would often get books from West Virginia University Press to sort of review. And my coworker brought me a copy of Merle Kaiser's The Book of the Dead with this intro essay by Catherine Venable Moore. And she brought this to me. It's like, you'd like this. And I got to it and began to read it. And I was super fascinated by this story. And one thing I forgot to add earlier was that of those 3,000 workers, roughly 2/3 of the men who worked in the tunnel were African American. So when I got this book from my coworker, I was reading Catherine's essay. I was reading Merle Kaiser's work, which is really fascinating. It's a book of poetry, but I always sort of think of Merle Kaiser as like a journalist poet. She went into the field and sort of reported like a reporter would for a typical written piece. But instead of just producing articles, she produced this book of poetry about what happened in the place. That combined with Catherine Venable Moore's really beautiful essay about navigating the space just captured my imagination. And it probably was roughly maybe a year and a half after that, or a year, that I actually got to meet Catherine and get a tour of Hawks Nest locations, which really, really hooked me to this story. I knew that I wanted to do something to talk about what happened in this space.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, this huge industrial disaster, which is what that is when you look at it from this distance, is forgotten in a lot of circles. But you can see this chain of how the memory has been kept alive, from Muriel Rukeyser collecting poems about some of the tragedy's victims and how it's affecting the families in the Book of the Dead, to Catherine Venable Moore's further work going there and sort of matching the poems to the area, to now your photography. How does that feel to kind of build on that chain of work and giving more attention to this tragedy that's been forgotten by so many people?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I was totally building on like the people who came before me in this work. And with my role, I was super fascinated by the visual archive that was surrounding Hawks Nest. I found that when I began just to do just a little bit of research into like what visually existed around Hawks Nest, I oftentimes I couldn't find African Americans represented in stories that were out there. And I was super curious, like, where are they in these spaces? But, in the visual archive itself, you can see little glimpses, little threads of their existence in the space. And I knew that I needed to start from this point, right? But also at the same time, that's the beautiful thing about storytelling. It's the beautiful thing about photography, about arts, about journalism, that it's all cumulative. Like, we're all building on each other. None of us exist in vacuums. Like, our work is referenced with somebody else, and then we do a thing. And I always like to say, like, it takes more than one brick to build a house or wall, and I feel like my project is one brick, along with Catherine's brick, along with Mark Rookhouse's brick, and hopefully many others after me who might take up the story. The book itself is, I call it like a speculative archive, but like a speculative visual archive. It's this combination of images that I've made, so like images that I've constructed, images that I just found through direct observation of looking at the landscape around Hawks Nest. It's filled with archival images from the archive, and it's filled with writing, a couple poems, and a lot of historical details about the Hawks Nest Tunnel. It almost feels like a collage experience in some ways, but I feel like this is another way for us to sort of open up what's possible in our understanding of history, understanding of West Virginia, and understanding of Appalachia.
Yeah, one thing that just strikes me when I consider your book and Muriel Rukeyser's work is just the value of art, not only in helping people process what happened, but in documenting it and tracking the landscape and the human impact outside of official company records.
Yeah, no, totally. Archival records are interesting things because we often look at them as these primary source documents, as truth in a way that kind of come from history. But we always have to remember that each archival record was made with a purpose, made by a person behind a record who had a point of view. And if we don't know what that point of view is, then we have to be very careful with those records when looking at them. And so I think, art is one of the ways the approach is to look at these records and try to both see the truth of like who made it, but then also realize it's a double-edged sword. Like, it was made for a purpose, but then it could be reused to tell a different story.
I want to quote a line from Anita Jones Cecil, who's the granddaughter in one of the families that was involved. This is from Catherine's essay. Anita says, quote, "They actively sought people who were poor, who were desperate and uneducated, and shipped them up here. Expendable people that nobody would miss." End of the quote. And that was a descendant of a family of white workers who still received roughly twice as much money as the black workers did. I appreciate photographers for your eyes and what you can see and capture that a lot of us don't see. So as a photographer and a human being, when you look back on this tragedy, what do you see when you look back on it?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think almost naturally we tend to want to focus on the negative. Like, we know a number of lives lost. we know like the extraction from the landscape and how the landscape's been changed. We can see the violence. If you have ever traveled in that area around Hawks Nest State Park, you have a river and then you have these dries, all the water is gone, which creates like another sort of recreational space, but it's essentially like, it's almost like a weird little scab on the earth where water should be. We have all this, the disaster, that's sort of in our face all the time, and the violence that's in the landscape. For my method and how I'm working, like I need to recognize that and embrace that sort of that violence in the landscape, but then also find a light. And for me, that light came and just interacting with these archival records, finding these threads of these African-American men in the archive, popping them out through my artwork and my process, and taking a picture that initially was meant to document a industrial process. It was never about the people, and popping those men out and making that image about them again so we can remember who they are. And in those images, you can see like lives lived. You can see desires and needs in those images. So for me, that is the light of this. It's where I find hope, is that they just weren't victims, but they were people with full lives, and to learn how to look at people with this wider embrace.
This is like emotionally heavy material. It's hard to read these poems and to read Catherine's work and to look at these images. But this work required you to spend lengths of time immersed in that material and that world. What wisdom do you take away from that work?
Honestly, it's we live in this super digital age where like we see like things through other mediated experiences, whether it's from the phone or even from a book, really, right? For me, it was the importance of actually showing up to spaces and actually coming to the space and then taking that quiet time to look at something out of our busy digital lives, to sort of pay homage to a space and with these people on your mind. It feels almost religious or spiritual in a way, but I think it's a way of like paying honor to what's happened in these spaces, even though there's nothing really in that landscape that points directly at that or them or their presence, but almost like taking time to like sense it, It's almost like an honoring of the ancestors in a way, in which I think it's important to, in our busy digital lives, to slow down and make time to do that.
What are you working on now, and how did this experience sort of change the shape of how you view your photography?
Yeah, working on Appalachian Ghosts really required me to sort of use archives in creative ways, to use archives as like threads to create new work. So that technique now I'm currently applying just in a different place. Like I'm wrapping up a project in North Carolina where I, again, use archival records, less visual records, but using like archival runaway slave ads and using information in those runaway slave ads, and then visiting the locations that are mentioned in the ads and trying to sort of almost, again, look for, like before when I was working on Appalachian Ghosts, I was almost looking for ghosts. Actually, I was looking for ghosts in the landscape, and I'm doing it again in North Carolina, this time using runaway slave ads as my reference, and learning how to look at the landscape through their eyes, or trying to learn how to look at the landscape through their eyes, is the current project that I'm working on. And that project is called, It's Hard to Stop Rebels That Time Travel. So again, it's this revisiting of a landscape, that has a really, really hard history. One thing that's different this time is that my family has roots in these locations that I'm working currently. So I did take a much more like a personal look at the archive in a space where I have blood connections to the land.
Raymond, I appreciate your work and how it, changes how we look at the past, and how that kind of in turn changes how we consider the present. Thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia and speaking with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Raymond Thompson Jr.'s book is Appalachian Ghost, a photographic reimagining of the Hawks Nest Tunnel disaster, from the University of Kentucky Press. Coming up, a Tennessee carpet repairman turns old rugs into art. You're Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, offering 31 bachelor-level degrees and 6 master-level degrees for students of any age. More information at concord.edu.
Lots of families live with furniture, silverware, and rugs, but we often take them for granted. We seldom think about who makes these items or where to turn when they need repaired. One man in Kingsport, Tennessee, has been building and repairing carpets and rugs for over 50 years. For Jerry Machen Sr., the business not only provides him with a livelihood, but also an outlet for expressing creativity. In 2022, Folkways reporter Nicole Musgrave reported this story.
In their 2-room workshop in downtown Kingsport, Jerry Machen and his wife and business partner, Linda Machen, are picking out colors for a custom butterfly rug.
What is this? Mustard?
Mustard seed.
Where are you going with the mustard seed?
She just wanted it to pop on the corners.
Like here?
Jerry designed the rug and created a template out of butcher paper. The future rug will be one big butterfly in a mix of pastel colors. As they work, Jerry tapes small pieces of yarn to the template to see how all the colors work together.
Hold on to it. Thank you. Beautiful. God might hire us to make new butterflies.
The Machens have owned their business for over 50 years. They named it Agape Carpet and Rug Specialists of America.
Agape is a Greek word. It means God's unconditional love. I guess the reason why I can create and do the things that we do is His love for us and me loving exactly what I do.
Jerry's love for carpet started in the mid-60s. He was in his 20s and was working at a furniture store, creating custom draperies.
That was my first love. And then they needed help in carpet installation. So I fell in love with carpet.
Jerry learned the ins and outs of installing carpet while at the furniture store. But eventually, he struck out on his own. With every installation job he did, Jerry always saved pieces of scrap carpet in case his customers needed repair work done. After a while, he had so much scrap carpet that he rented out an entire house to store it all in. Linda was not very happy about this.
See, I didn't know about the house for a little while. That was interesting. It caused a little stir at the house.
My wife came in one day and said, "Get rid of it all. You got to get this place cleaned out."
But Jerry didn't want to just throw all the scraps away. He thought he could make use of them. One day, he saw a painting of a mountain scene and he got an idea. He decided to recreate the painting with scraps.
I said, I can do that in carpet. I've never built one before in my life. But in my mind, I've thought of it over and over again that I could build that.
Linda came home to find Jerry working in a frenzy on the kitchen floor.
I walk in from work and my whole kitchen floor is covered with pieces. And he's going to put a picture together. And I'm like, is it going to be done before I have to start supper?
At this point, it was the 70s, so Jerry was working with pieces of shag carpet in vibrant hues of blues, oranges, reds, and pastel pinks. He hand-sewed all the pieces together from the back, and he was surprised by the outcome.
When I turned it over, I was amazed at how it looked. It was actually beautiful.
After creating that mountain scene, Jerry soon began sewing one-of-a-kind rugs and wall hangings for customers. He's created hundreds of designs, including horoscope signs, landscapes, animals, and logos. For Jerry, it's a thrill to bring an idea to life.
I love working with my hands. If you can build it in your mind, you can put your hands to it and you can put it together.
Over the years, the business has turned into a family affair. Along with Linda, Jerry works alongside his grandson and his oldest son, Jerry Jr., who goes by Joey. Today, in the back room of the workshop, Jerry watches over as Joey uses clippers to shave down the edge of a piece of carpet. Once the edge is straight and neat, Joey uses an air compressor to blow the tiny scraps out of his way. Finally, he sews on a strip of fringe to finish the edge.
And
Voila.
nice and stitched through here.
Joey explains that along with installing carpet and creating custom designs, they also do a lot of restoration work.
The restoration is a big part of the business. A lot of people have rugs at homes that's been handed down from generation to generation, and bringing those back to life is pretty amazing.
But the Machens don't just clean and repair rugs that customers bring in. Sometimes, Jerry will find rugs that people have thrown away. He'll bring them into the shop and give them the new life he feels they deserve.
I can tell a real good rug, so when I find a good one, then of course I'll stop and pick it up. I like to solve it. I like to go and make it whole again. Instead of trashing it and throwing it away, then I like to repair it or build it back.
Much like the custom design work, the restoration work is an opportunity for Jerry to put his creativity and problem-solving skills into motion.
Every one of them tells a story. It's not one rug that is especially hand-knotted and tufted that is the same. Every one is different. So you have to find the method that they use, the knot that they use to even repair it. If not, it's going to show up. So it's a learning process every day.
Jerry's not the only one at the shop who finds creative fulfillment in the installation and restoration. Joey does too.
It's more artwork than it is work. It's more creative. You know, you have a chance to expand your imagination on doing different things, you know. And it's a lot of fun.
And Linda feels similarly.
I didn't even know I had any creative abilities, but I was good with colors and with shapes.
Jerry continues to teach others about the art of carpet design and repair. In 2021, he was awarded a Traditional Arts Apprenticeship Grant from the Tennessee Folklife Program. Through the grant, he's mentoring Stacy Kimbler on how to create pictorial wall hangings using a tufting gun. Today at the shop, Stacy's working on a honeybee design. Stacy stands at a 7-foot-tall wooden frame that has a piece of white cloth stretched over it. He holds the tufting gun up to the cloth, and as he pulls the trigger, yarn shoots into the cloth at high speeds, creating the tufted design. Jerry stands nearby and gives advice on how close together the tufted rows should be.
Yeah, you can go over top of it, it won't hurt it, but just go and fill it in the middle. Tighter the better. Yeah.
While Jerry values passing down his knowledge of carpet art to others, he acknowledges that there's always more he can learn too.
If you have a gift, then the gift should keep on giving. I think it's very important to just keep what we have and learn from it. I don't know everything, and I'll never know everything, but I'm willing to learn each and every day.
And after all these years in the business, the possibility of discovering something new is what keeps Jerry going. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Nicole Musgrave in Kingsport, Tennessee.
That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. For more Folkways stories, visit our website, wvpublic.org. It's been 2 years since devastating floods swept through eastern Kentucky. Now the state is looking to resettle families away from hollers prone to flooding by building a series of housing developments on old surface mines. Researchers say it's an example of climate migration. Kentucky Public Radio's Justin Hicks has more.
I was riding shotgun in a car with Mindy Miller and Julia Stanganelli earlier this year. We wound up and down mountain roads in Knott County before stopping at the edge of a dirt path that was very muddy.
Yeah, we can park here and walk. Yeah, you don't want to get your car stuck.
Miller and Stanganelli both work for the Housing Development Alliance. It's a local nonprofit that builds homes. And Stanganelli says this is one of 7 developments where Kentucky is spending nearly $300 million in federal disaster recovery aid. She says they've tapped HDA to build here.
Okay, so right now we are looking at kind of an overgrown field, but soon will be 57 homes on this part of the property, and then even more homes up further.
We're on a mountaintop, surrounded by acres of mostly flat land, which is rare in eastern Kentucky. Stain Janelli says this site is called Chestnut Ridge.
Yeah, it is really pretty up here, the views of the mountains in the distance.
The state is putting most of these new neighborhoods on land where mountaintops were destroyed to mine coal, an industry which contributes to a warming climate and researchers say increases the risk of flooding in the valleys below. Stain Janelli says the sites might get used for more than just houses too.
And there is a lot of land, so it's a lot of opportunity for the future could be residential, commercial.
Most people in Appalachia live along creeks inside mountain hollers because it's flat, but that exposes them to flooding. These new sites are flat and dry. The state still has a lot of progress to make, and it won't be cheap. Before houses can be built, the state estimates it'll spend about $135 million just to build roads, water, sewer, and electrical lines up to places where none existed before. At a different building site, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear acknowledged the project comes amid a changing climate.
We are seeing more weather events here and around the country. Even with steps that are being taken, we have to build more resilient, and we got to move people out of the floodplain.
There's a long history of climate migration in the U.S., says Nicholas Pinter at UC Davis, and the pace is picking up due to climate change. But it's not just that.
So climate change is one thing that's cranking up the engine, giving us rising sea level, increasing intensity coastal storms. But you know what? Every one of these is a past planning error.
Pinter has studied lots of examples of people relocating due to risks of disaster. Still, it's pretty rare to see initiatives like Kentucky's, where the government is creating entirely new communities.
It's different than the examples that we've looked at in the past. You are doing a new experiment.
Pinter says usually after disasters, people will sell their risky land to the federal government. But then they're on their own for where to go next. He also knows of cases where entire towns of people will all move together. But Kentucky's approach isn't quite either of those. It's trying to usher people who take a government buyout in becoming the first settlers of these high-ground neighborhoods. People might have to change towns or even counties, but at least they can stay in eastern Kentucky.
It's individual relocations. It's seeding new communities. There are probably going to be unique challenges of that. How do you foster a sense of culture, a sense of social community, and that? How do you unite those people in those new locations?
Pinter says despite the unique approach, the overall theme, people moving because of a changing climate, is a tale as old as time. In Hazard, I'm Justin Hicks.
Flooding is a frequent problem in Appalachia. Last year, there was widespread drought, too. West Virginia was particularly hard hit. In 2024, all 55 counties experienced moderate to extreme drought conditions, with the state's eastern panhandle being the most affected. The drought there was especially hard on farmers. WVPB's Jack Walker reports.
Down the back roads of Jefferson County, plywood signs point drivers to Town and Country Nursery. The farm stand isn't far from where co-owner Bob Tabb grew up, and it's part of the same area his family has called home for more than 100 years. Like the signs tell you, Tabb's farm stand boasts produce of all kinds, from peaches to eggplants to tomatoes bigger than your fist. But this year, Tabb says the harvest has looked different.
Well, it's the extreme heat and the drought. It's a combination of the two that's affecting agriculture. If we had sufficient moisture, the heat wouldn't have as much impact. But some plants, when it gets really hot, they'll actually what we call heat stall. In other words, you can actually get it too hot for the plants.
The United States Department of Agriculture has classified a current dry spell in the Eastern Panhandle as an extreme drought. State officials say it's possibly the worst in decades. Tabb said the drought is making it hard for crops like soybean and corn to grow. Where corn would normally stand 7 or 8 feet tall by now, Tabb said his crops are only hitting the 4-foot mark. Some fields might not even be harvestable come fall. Still, Tabb says there are ways for farmers to work around drought conditions.
Yeah, I gotcha. On this plant here, these plants,
On a cart ride across the property, he pointed out small tubes that run alongside each crop, dispensing low-pressure water at a regular interval. They're connected to a water tank at the center of Tab's farm.
Right now we're pumping anywhere from 25 to 30,000 gallons of water per day, to keep everything going. So if we didn't have irrigation, we'd be shut down. It's just trying to rely on the natural rainfall. We had a really wet spring, and now it's been just a really hot, dry summer, and it's been spotty.
Irrigation techniques like these can keep the soil hydrated year-round. But while they might keep Tab's farm afloat, they're costly and require practice year over year. It's something Tab's family has mastered through generations of farming. But for newer or smaller farms, the learning curve can be steep. And when a summer's harvest makes up the basis of your income, there's much less room for error.
So it's a challenge. Agriculture and farming is not just a job, and it's not just an occupation. It's a way of life.
Farmers can get insurance for their crops, but Tab said this doesn't cover the full cost of a harvest gone wrong. Sometimes the state or federal government provides farmer support, but this often only comes months later, once the financial burden of a faulty season has already been felt. The impact of the drought extends even beyond West Virginia, according to Jerry Geiger, a senior service hydrologist for the National Weather Service in Baltimore.
And also, even the Potomac is running relatively low in terms of stage heights and also overall flow of water, which I know is causing some upstream concerns for water resource issues, especially into the D.C. metro that pulls the water. A lot of the water they use for their drinking water and other general water comes from the Potomac.
Because portions of Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. share waterways with West Virginia, the lack of rainfall is hurting other states too. Geiger said conditions like these are typically addressed on a state-by-state basis. Back in West Virginia, Governor Jim Justice declared the drought a state of emergency for all 55 counties. Beyond that, Kent Leonhardt, West Virginia Commissioner of Agriculture, said state officials are discussing the best ways to help farmers through a rough patch.
Well, what's going on right now is we had a meeting last week with all the partners to find out what's available and what we can do because, you're right, and everybody's a little bit different. The crop farmers have a different need than the livestock farmers, than the orchardists.
Leonhardt encouraged farmers to lean on resources already in place, like contacting their local branch of the West Virginia Association of Conservation Districts. These regional chapters provide conservation and environmental resources. Leonhardt said they've already activated their emergency expenses to help farms get access to tanks and water supplies. Plus, with the governor declaring a state of emergency, Leonhardt pointed to resources provided by the Farm Service Agency, part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. With a state of emergency order in place, the Farm Service Agency can provide farmers disaster aid and emergency loans to recover financial losses. Leonhardt said this year's drought doesn't seem like a long-term trend, because recently there have been more wet summers than dry ones. Still, he said it's pushing agriculture officials to build upon the supports in place for sudden dry spells.
Jefferson County, for example, is probably in the second worst drought in 130 years. So it doesn't seem to be a trend, but it's something that we need to watch for. The rest of the Eastern Panhandle is, I'm told, is the third worst drought in the last 130 years. So, farmers experience an awful lot of uncertainty, and weather's one of them.
For a full list of state resources available to farmers during the drought, visit our website at wvpublic.org. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Jack Walker in Jefferson County.
An exhibit called Big Bugs has been touring botanical gardens and nature centers since 1994. It features sculptures of insects and arachnids, some more than 10 feet tall. Now the exhibit has landed at the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. The Allegheny Front's Carol Holsopple has more.
David Rogers' Big Bugs Plus Pollinators features 10 pieces from the Long Island artist who works with native wood and natural materials. The Botanic Gardens' Mark Miller and Beth Exton gave me a short tour.
One of the first exhibits you'll come to when you walk out of our Welcome Center is the hummingbird up here in our orientation garden. It is total about 10 feet tall, 8 feet wide at its largest point. So it shows a flower with about 3 buds on it. And then the hummingbird is like hovering over above the one bloom that's about to open.
What kind of wood is this made out of?
This one is black walnut and rainbow poplar for the bird. And then the flower is red cedar and black locust.
The hummingbird is very much attracted to our native cardinal flower, Lobelia cardinalis, and that's exactly what we have planted around the sculpture.
And I think you've shared with me, Mark, that the cardinal flower has that tubular form to it.
Yes.
That helps, that's what the hummingbird needs to get its beak down into.
That's exactly right. And so you see them tend to go after hot-colored tubular flowers.
I love the way the flower stems are bent with the natural wood.
Mm-hmm. Looks like it's kind of blowing a little bit in a soft breeze.
I consider it polished and refined.
All right, lead on.
So you can see him starting to poke out through the trees. He's our daddy longleg. You can walk underneath him and just kind of meander around all of his legs. But he's probably 12 feet tall at the highest point. He is standing guard here in our festival lawn.
Technically not an insect. This is an arachnid. It has 8 legs, not 6. But definitely an important part of our ecosystem.
How so?
It is beneficial. It will go after pests as food. I think that's important. So this one has a body of willow.
All right, I'm going to go under.
His legs just look so delicate this way. Like you don't think of that when you see them live. So.
Oh yeah, when you get up close, you can see the detail on the wood.
Mm-hmm.
It almost looks like an Amish rocking chair. You know the rails of an Amish rocking chair?
He's not solid. You can look up through him and see the sky and just kind of like see what he's seeing at this perspective.
What would you like visitors to take away with them about bugs and pollinators?
I think it's important that the visitors, after seeing David Rogers' Big Bugs Plus Pollinators exhibit, really go home with a sense of what can I do?
It's actually easier than you might think. Pollinators are looking for the same things we are. They're looking for food, and they're looking for water, a bird bath, or even a small bowl of water with maybe a rock or 2 in it that just come above the surface of the water. That's great. And plants that are blooming at different times of the year that provide nectar and pollen. And try to avoid using any kinds of pesticides. So that's really what you can do.
The traveling exhibit David Rogers' Big Bugs Plus Pollinators appeared last year at the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. In summer 2026, it'll be at the Franklin Park Conservatory in Columbus, Ohio. For generations, historians argued that European settlers found Appalachia devoid of indigenous people, that it was just a hunting ground. That turns out to be a myth. Appalachia has long been home for indigenous people. A series of events in Elkins, West Virginia is telling their stories. It's part of the exhibit Creating Home, Indigenous Roots and Connections in the Appalachian Forest, and it's bringing together citizens of Native nations to share their history and culture. WVPB's Chris Schultz reports.
So here we'll go with a stomp dance. Yo-yo! Hey, yo-ho!
In a room of the West Virginia Railroad Museum, a small group sits on folding chairs against the wall while David Locklear sings traditional songs. Locklear is originally from North Carolina and a member of the Tuscarora tribe.
We do songs of the Longhouse people. We call it the Haudenosaunee. Those songs are traditional to us. They represent different parts of the creation, and that's the way we were taught to honor the creation and honor what the Creator's given us. So over the years, over time, traditionally we've created songs that represent different parts of the creation.
Locklear was invited to Elkins as part of Creating Home, Indigenous Roots and Connections in the Appalachian Forest, a series of events being presented by the Appalachian Forest National Heritage Area through this fall. Between songs, Locklear explains to the gathering some of the history and meaning behind the songs he's playing.
So the next dance we're going to share with you is a round dance. These dances that we're sharing today are social dances for us. We do have ceremonial dances and ceremonial songs.
Locklear has never met his collaborator for the day, dancer Jocelyn Jones, and her daughter.
It was nice to meet David through song and dance, and it's a way that we form a connection without words.
Jones is from the Allegheny Territory of the Seneca Nation in New York. Despite never having met before today, she was able to flawlessly coordinate with Locklear through their shared language and culture.
The Haudenosaunee are comprised of 6 different nations that have similar languages, similar customs and traditions. So it's like meeting a long-lost friend that we have that in common already, and that we can just come together and we can share what we already know, and it went seamlessly.
Phyllis Baxter is Director Emeritus and the Interpretation Chair for the Appalachian Forest National Heritage Area. She says when the area was nationally designated in 2019, a management plan had to be created, which led to building relationships with some of the indigenous folks with ancestral interests in West Virginia.
And we wanted to tell that story of how important indigenous people are to our area, both in the past and now. We received a grant from the National Park Foundation to do interpretive products and outreach to help build those connections and tell that story. So this exhibit is one of the primary products coming from that.
Baxter says with grant funding from the state and some other sources, they built out a comprehensive exhibit available in the Appalachian Forest Discovery Center through the fall of 2024. She says they're doing more programming to bring in indigenous artists and culture keepers to share their experience in their arts. Larry Gent is the Fiscal Sustainability Director for the Appalachian Forest National Heritage Area. He says he is primarily of Cherokee and Welsh background, but also Shawnee.
I have spent my life relearning and reclaiming our family stories. I have been deeply and personally involved in the 19th and 20th century efforts to remove Native people either in a wholesale and physical way or legislate Native people out of existence.
Jen says he's spent the last 40 years trying to tell the stories of Native people, particularly in Appalachia.
Many people are aware that Appalachian culture is a confluence of black and white, and there's a third stream of culture that has contributed to this, the Native American stream, and that's often been overlooked or even written out of the history books.
Eleanor Renshaw is an AmeriCorps member serving with the Appalachian Forest Heritage Area as a museum associate at the Appalachian Forest Discovery Center. She says that overlooked history was a major motivation for the ongoing series.
What is often unfortunately taught in schools here is that Native communities were never here. If they were, it was for a short time. It was passing through. This was a hunting ground, is the quote that we often hear. That's patently not true.
Renshaw oversaw the design and creation of the Creating Home Museum exhibit. She says the exhibit hopes to show that there's many ways to tell the story of Native communities here.
We're hoping to tell these stories through personal stories, through stories passed down through generations, through archaeology, through art, and using all these different ways of knowing. We're hoping to have people connect to a new story that is not often told in formal education.
Renshaw says that the project's title, Creating Home, touches on a connection to place that is quintessentially Appalachian, but that has been stripped from the land's original inhabitants.
The idea of creating home, we wanted to get people to start thinking about how these mountains, these forests have really provided such an important home generationally for so many folks, for Indigenous communities, Indigenous nations, whether that is represented in schools now or not.
From Locklear's perspective, the effort is already paying dividends.
It's good to be able to come to an area like this and present traditional music, because some tribes have lost a lot So, not knowing the area, it's good to be able to bring, some traditional things here.
The museum display will be open to the public through November, and symposiums are planned for August and November. More art events will be announced as they are organized through the fall. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Chris Schultz in Morgantown.
To learn more about upcoming events in the series, visit our website, wvpublic.org. We close the show with the story of a small-town basketball league that brings big joy for its community. It was reported by high school students Evan Ellison and Abram Witt from the Fayette Institute of Technology in West Virginia.
The town of Mount Hope is located in Fayette County, West Virginia. Mount Hope is a small town with only about 1,000 residents. With it being so small, you must wonder what it might have been like so many years ago. The community has experienced many hardships, one of those being a fire that left the town in shambles. But with teamwork, the town stuck together and it was rebuilt better than ever. Located on Main Street in front of the Methodist Church is a YMCA building that has been changed to a community center. Inside the community center, there is the Mount Hope Youth Basketball League founded by community members. Little did they know the league would take off like it did. David Altizer is a pastor of the Mount Hope Methodist Church who has been a part of the community for about 4 years.
I'm from West Virginia, but I went to Kentucky for 33 years, and Kentucky is a crazy basketball state. So I coached basketball. We're actually president of a basketball league in Kentucky, and when the calling came open for the Mount Hope Church, the team that interviewed me for the pastor's job asked me, "Do you like basketball?" I said, "Man, I love basketball." So this is my 4th year as pastor here. The first year, the city would not let us use the facility because of COVID. But this is my 3rd year doing this, and words can't describe how awesome I love this program.
Don McClung is one of the individuals who keep the league running.
Oh, I think it's a positive. We have so many people that talk about our league, that spreads the word, and they come from all over.
Well, we started out small. I think we had 4 teams the first year, almost all from the church. Then it just grew from there.
Did you think it'd ever get this big?
I didn't think it'd get big or small. I just went with the flow. Well, I think it brings a lot of people into town. I think we have like 44 to 48,000 people, or attendance-wise, a year that do come through town. Of course, that's not all. It's like taking attendance at a Mountaineer game. Every month. Some part of those are the same people, but that's attendance-wise.
Deborah Manor is one of the leaders of the Methodist Church and one of the founders of the Mount Hope Youth Basketball League.
We started very small. We just advertised in the local elementary and had about 80 responses, so we were very small to start, but so we started small, and here we are today, busy.
Matthew Craddock is a volunteer coach and referee at the league. He also has a son who plays for his team.
I think the best thing they learn here is respect, and to do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That's a number one thing I feel like we're lacking in today's society, and I feel like that it really is instilled in them here. And as far as the game, we just try to teach the basics of the game and how it's played, and just coach their effort for the most part. And like I said, it's the respect is a big part of this down here.
We allow parents or other people, once we make sure that they'll fit into the program, good background, that sort of thing. We have all of our people here are volunteers, all of our coaches, our referees. We try to have 3 referees, at least for 3rd grade and up, for all the games.
Brings me great joy to be part of this. I'm so happy to be here today, I get to come here Saturday and just, I take up money at the door. I take up the tickets, and I love it. Just get a chance to meet with the people and talk to them and see the energy and the joy that these youth have coming in here. It's filled my life with joy. That's the effect it's had on me.
It is no question that the Mount Hope Youth Basketball League has influenced not just the community of Mount Hope, but all the individuals who come volunteer to coach, referee, clean up, or even just watch the games that go on inside the community center.
That story is part of a partnership between West Virginia Public Broadcasting and the Fayette Institute of Technology. Until next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Kaya Cater, Steve Earle, Jeff Ellis, Yonder Mountain String Band, and John Blissard. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, focusing on students' futures. Classes available at concord.edu/apply.
Paradise fell and the tenements grew. Swept my soul across the avenue. Paradise fell and the tenements grew. The tenements grew. Paradise fell and the tenements grew. The tenements grew. I'm a real live wire. I keep my suffering slow. You're a child of fire and the Holy Ghost. But we keep our hand close and we play it on out. We let it play it on out. In the mother's breast and the father's bone. In that city of gold, revelations unknown, ports and temperance gray. We could live that way. You could live that way. That needle rides high on the bruised up tracks, like a bitter train along the Savior's back.